Hi viewers, how are you doing today? Today's story is a dark, emotionally powerful version of my Snow White twist. What if the magic mirror didn't tell you who's the fairest, but showed you how you die? Because when the queen looked into it, she saw Snow White and her own end. The story begins like this. In a kingdom draped in velvet and gold, where beauty was worshipped like a god, stood in Queen's chamber her most prized possession, a tall, ancient mirror framed in black thorns. The Queen's hands still stuck to the sharp salt of boar blood when she stormed back to the private chamber. She slammed the oak door behind her. The torchlight flickered, dancing across the twisted black thorns that framed the ancient mirror at the far end. She crossed the room in 3 long strides, palms slamming hard against the carved glass frame. She snarled,
"Show me again. What is my fate now?"
The glass surface rippled immediately, faster than it had ever moved before. It did not stop at red murk, did not drag out the weight. The image cleared fast, and the Queen's breath caught again. This time, no air came back. This vision was worse. It did not end with a quick death in a glass coffin. It showed her years, decades, stretching out empty. It showed her throne slipping, one courtier at a time, one loyalty broken after another. It showed her growing old, alone, with no one to speak her name. It showed her dying in the dark, with no hand to close her eyes. The image held and shifted, showing one path after another. Every road, every choice, every turn, all of them led to the same end, her downfall, her death, caused by Snow White. The Queen stood frozen, her knuckles white where they gripped the mirror frame. The chill of the glass seeped through her skin, all the way to her bones. One by one, the paths flickered past, all endings the same. No escape, no reprieve. Slowly, a terrible truth pushed through the fog of her fear. This was not a fixed fate the mirror had pulled from the future. It was showing her what her own choices would build. The more she fought Snow White, the darker the future grew. The more she reached for a knife to stop the vision, the closer the vision came. The mirror was not predicting what would happen. It was reacting to what she already planned. Her fear fed it. Every beat of panic, every desperate order to hunt the girl, every poison she stirred in the dark, it fed the magic. It made the end more certain. This was not the mirror's curse. It was hers. She stepped back, breathing hard, and let her hand fall away from the frame. This was the magic no other mirror in the castle held. For longer than she could count, this mirror had been the only thing she trusted. More than her courtiers, more than her crown, more than any person who had ever walked the castle halls. Every night, without fail, the ritual repeated. After the last courtier bowed and left the throne room, the Queen would cross this private chamber in total silence. She would stop exactly 1 foot from the twisted black thorns that framed the glass. She would tilt her head, lower her voice, and whisper the same line every single night. "Show me tomorrow. Show me my fate." And every single night, the mirror obeyed. The glass would clear, soft golden light would spill out into the room, and the vision would take shape. For years, those visions never brought her anything but comfort. They showed her throne unchallenged, no treason bubbling under the surface, no rival gathering armies at the border. They showed her power, stretching across the kingdom, decade after decade, unbroken. They showed her rule holding firm, her name spoken with fear and respect in every corner of the land. Midwinter fell cold and silent over the castle. The wind howled through the outer walls, seeping through gaps in the stone, and turned the air in the private chamber sharp enough to bite. The Queen pulled the door shut behind her, bolted the lock, and turned toward the thorns. Her steps were steady, her voice was steady. She had done this 1,000 times before, and she expected to do it 1,000 more. She stopped exactly 1 foot from the frame, just as she always did. She lowered her voice, just as she always did, and whispered the words into the still air. "Show me tomorrow. Show me my fate." She waited for the soft golden light to spill out, for the familiar shapes of her unchallenged reign to clear in the glass. Nothing happened. The glass stayed dark. No light climbed to meet her eyes. She leaned forward a fraction, frowning. Had she spoken too quiet? She opened her mouth to repeat the line. That was when it moved. The surface shimmered. not the slow, steady shift it always made. A violent, rolling ripple, like a pond struck hard by a thrown stone. The movement spread out from the center, fast, unsteady, shaking the reflection of the torchlight on the glass. The queen froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never seen it do this. Not once, in all the years she had used it. The shimmer slowed. It stopped. The glass settled, and the color deepened. It turned, deep, dark, red, the exact color of fresh blood, spilled warm onto cold stone. She stared, unblinking, until her eyes began to water. Shapes were starting to form under the murky red surface, bleeding together, impossible to pick apart. She forced her feet to move, one slow step closer to the glass. She leaned in until her nose was only inches from the cold surface, and squinted. The shapes shifted. They locked into place. First, the walls. Rough, cold, gray stone. Not her chamber. A different room, smaller, darker. Empty, except for one thing in the center. A coffin. Carved all from clear glass, so thin she could see every line of what lay inside. She followed the shape with her eyes, up from the base, to the lid, to the body resting inside. It was her, lying perfectly still, skin pale as fresh fallen snow, no breath moving the chest, no pulse beating under the skin, lifeless, gone. She could not look away. The image held, sharp and clear, and her eyes dragged to the foot of the coffin, to the figure standing beside it, one hand resting lightly on the glass. It was Snow White. She stood straight. She was alive. Her skin glowed warm in the dim light of the chamber, and perched straight on her head, heavy and familiar, was the queen's own crown. The image held for 10 slow heartbeats, then faded. The red drained from the glass. The room went dark. The queen's knees went weak. She could not hold her weight any longer. She staggered back, boots sliding on the cold marble floor, until her shoulder slammed hard into the stone wall behind her. The impact of the image jolted up her neck, but she did not feel the pain. Her breath came in short, shaking bursts, uneven. She pushed the words out through clenched teeth, voice cracking.
No. This is a lie.
For years, the mirror had never lied to her. It had never shown her anything but the good, steady future she had always counted on. This had to be a trick, a flaw. A trick of the torchlight, or the midwinter cold. A low, cold whisper rose from the empty mirror surface, soft enough that it might have been the wind through the cracks, but sharp enough to cut straight through her denial.
The future does not lie. It only waits.
The whisper died away, but the cold of it stayed. It crawled down through her ribs, into her stomach, into the marrow of her bones. It wrapped around her spine, and it did not let go. She stood there, pressed to the wall, and felt it take root. Every future she had planned, every comfort she had counted on, every certainty that had held her throne together for years, all of it shattered in that single whisper. The queen pushed her shoulder off the wall, one slow inch at a time. Her legs still shook, her hands still trembled. But the fear that had rooted itself in her bones was no longer a numb, paralyzing thing. It turned sharp, it turned hard, it turned into purpose. This was not about who ruled the court. This was not about who was considered the fairest. All the old quarrels, all the petty rivalries, all the games of power she had played for decades, none of it mattered anymore. This was survival. If the vision the mirror showed was true, every day that Snow White drew breath was a day the coffin waited for the queen. She could not sit still. She could not wait for the future to creep through the castle gates and find her unarmed. She had to strike first. She had to stop the future before it could begin. She would not be a victim waiting to lie down in that glass box. The first pale light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the drapes before she moved. She sent a page to the guards' barracks with a single order: bring the best huntsman to the private chamber, immediately, no questions asked. The huntsman came, boots quiet on the marble, and stood before her with his head bowed.
If she lives, I die. You will find her. You will kill her. You will bring me her heart, sealed in an iron box. If you fail, if you let her run, you will take her place in that glass coffin. Do you understand me?
The huntsman rode out at a gallop, the queen's order ringing in his ears the whole way. He found Snow White by a stream, picking wild strawberries off a low bush, laughing at a butterfly that had landed on her wrist. He tied his horse to an oak, drew his sharp hunting knife, and crept through the underbrush toward her. He had killed men for the queen before. He had hunted boar and wolf and bear through the worst winter storms. He had never failed an order. He stepped out of the bush, knife held high, and stopped. Snow White turned to look at him. She did not flinch, she did not run. She held out her right hand filled with strawberries. He had killed many things, but he had never killed a child who offered him food. His hand began to shake. The knife trembled so hard the blade caught the sun and glinted. He lowered the blade, and the tension went out of his shoulders all at once. He could not do it. "Run," he said, voice rough with relief and fear. "Run deep into the woods, and never come back to the castle." Snow White did not hesitate. She turned and ran, disappearing into the thick green undergrowth before he could draw another breath. 100 yards away, a full-grown wild boar rooted through the brush for acorns. The huntsman tracked it, drove his knife into its heart, and cut the organ out, wrapping it in clean oilcloth to seal in the blood. He packed it into the iron box the queen had given him, and rode back toward the castle, the lie heavy in his saddlebags. The queen waited in the great hall until the sun dipped below the western battlements. The main fire crackled low, casting long shadows across the stone floors when the huntsman's boots sounded on the steps. He carried the iron box in both hands, head still bowed, and set it at her feet. It was still warm, still sticky with dried blood along the seams. The huntsman spoke the words he had practiced on the ride back.
"It is done. Your order is fulfilled."
The queen did not answer. She stared down at the box, her fingers curling tight around the arms of her throne. She had ordered him to bring back a human heart. She knew what a human heart felt like. She knew what it weighed. She rose from the throne, one slow step at a time, and reached down to pry the iron lid open with her bare hands. The scent of fresh blood hit her first. It smelled like wild boar, like game fat, like the forest, not like the heart of a girl. She reached in, wrapped her fingers around it, and pulled it out to hold it up to the firelight. It was too big, too coarse. The shape was wrong. The lie hit her like a fist to the throat. Her face burned hot, then went cold. The huntsman had betrayed her. He had let the girl run. He had handed her survival to Snow White, and sealed the queen's death warrant with his lie. She dropped the boar's heart onto the stone floor. It hit with a heavy, wet thud. Her hands were sticky with blood when she turned away. She slammed her palm against the twisted thorn frame of the mirror, the wood digging sharp into her sticky skin. The thorns did not cut her. They never did. They only held the glass, waiting for her command. "Show me again," she snarled, her voice rough and raw from the rage burning in her chest.
What is my fate now?
The mirror held still for 3 long heartbeats. No shimmer, no shift of light. It just looked back at her, a flat black reflection of the torchlight on the wall. Then the surface rippled, slow at first, then faster, like the current of a river pulling under the ice. The first image cleared. It was her, 10 years from now, lines around her eyes. Her hands shaking when she poured wine, her voice cracking when she addressed the court. The courtiers did not look at her when she spoke. They looked past her, toward the door, where Snow White stood waiting. The vision shifted again. 20 years from now, the throne room was half empty. Tapestries had fallen from the walls. The great fire burned low, and no one bothered to restoke it. She sat alone on the throne, no one at her side, no one to bring her news, no one to answer when she called. The vision shifted a third time. It was her deathbed, a cold stone chamber. No candles, no one holding her hand, no one to close her eyes when the breath stopped. The face by the bed, the face that stood over her when she died, was always the same, Snow White. Every path, every choice, every turn of the calendar, it all ended the same way. Her downfall, her death, caused by the girl who still ran free in the woods. Before that, the mirror had only shown her decades of unchallenged power. Then she hunted the girl. Then the mirror showed her coffin. Then the huntsman betrayed her. Then the mirror showed her slow, lonely death. Every time she reached for violence, every time she gave in to fear, the future got darker. The end got closer. Slowly, the terrible truth dawned. It was not fixed. It was not written before she acted. The mirror was not showing her a fate that was waiting to happen. It was showing her the future that her own fear was building. The more I fight this, she thought, the closer it gets. Every order she sent after the girl, every poison she stirred in the cellars, every plan she wove to sneak into the woods and end the threat before it could grow, every single step she took to stop the vision of her death. It only pulled the vision closer. It wove the threads of that dark future tighter, until it became real. The mirror did not predict her fate. It reacted to it. It fed on her fear. The more afraid she became, the more certain the dark future grew. She had been running from the coffin this whole time, and every step of her run had pushed her straight toward it. Hundreds of miles away, deep in the old forest, Snow White woke at dawn every morning to the smell of pine and baking bread. The 7 dwarfs had given her shelter. They had given her a bed by the fire and work to keep her hands busy, and a promise that no hunter would find her there. For weeks, she slept through the nights, exhausted from running, grateful for the quiet. Then the dreams began. At first, they were just the same old nightmare. The queen stood at the edge of the clearing, a knife in her hand, her face twisted with rage. Snow White would run, her boots slipping on moss, her lungs burning, and wake with the sheets tangled around her legs. Then, the dreams changed. The queen was still there, in the dark chamber with the thorns and the mirror. But she was not reaching for a knife. She was pressing her forehead to the cold glass, her shoulders shaking, silent sobs racking her body. She was not hunting, she was hiding. One morning, she woke before the dwarfs stirred, the dream still sharp in her mind. She sat up by the fire and let the truth settle. The queen was not her enemy, she was just afraid. Weeks passed. The queen did not leave her private chamber. She did not eat. She did not sleep more than a few minutes at a time. Her fingers shook when she reached for the vials of poison she kept on the table. Her knees buckled when she crossed the room to the mirror. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the glass coffin. Every time she opened them, she stared at the dark surface of the mirror, waiting for another vision that would tell her the end was closer. She traced the thorn frame with a trembling fingertip, over and over, until the thorns cut into her skin. The blood dripped down the wood, onto the marble floor. She did not wipe it away. She had tried every path. She had ordered the hunt. She had brewed the poisons. She had planned every disguise, every trick, every way to end the threat before it could end her. Every step had only pulled the coffin closer. There was no way out through more fear, no way out through more killing. She had to know there had to be one path left, one future that was not already stitched tight with her own blood. She pressed her forehead to the cold mirror glass. The chills seeped into her bones, but she did not pull back. She drew in a breath that burned her throat and screamed. The echo of her scream faded. No sound came back. No shimmer of glass. No glow of light forming an image. No cold whisper from the surface. The mirror stayed still, flat and dark, as if it had gone dead. The queen's breath caught in her throat. She held it, counting heartbeats against the glass. 1, 2, 3, 10, 20. She lifted her head, her fingers curling around the edge of the frame until her knuckles ached. Was this the answer? No vision at all? No way out? She opened her mouth to scream again, to demand the mirror keep its promise, when the glass finally moved. A faint shimmer rippled from the bottom edge, slow and gentle, nothing like the violent heaving of the previous visions. The darkness pulled back, soft at first, then sharp and clear. It showed this very chamber, the same torchlight, the same marble floor. The twisted black thorn frame stood exactly where it stood now, and standing right in the center of the room, between the queen and the mirror, was Snow White. She did not hold a sword. She did not reach for the queen's throat. She held out one open hand, palm up, no weapon hidden in her sleeve. Behind them, against the far wall, the throne stood against the stone. It was not empty. It was not crowded. There was space for 2 people to sit, side by side, no one pushed out, no one replaced. The glass coffin was nowhere to be seen. No pale, lifeless body, no stolen crown perched on an enemy's head. The image held steady, clear as the torchlight that spilled across it. The queen's knees went weak. For the first time in months, a sliver of something soft pushed through the fear in her bones. Could this be real? 3 days passed. The queen did not sleep. She did not eat. She stood by the mirror from dawn until dusk, the poisoned apple curled tight in her right hand. She had planned every step. When Snow White walked through the door, she would offer the fruit as a peace offering. She would smile and watch the girl take a bite, and the threat would end before it began. The vision echoed in her head, over and over. Space for both of us. But the fear was older than the vision. It had rooted into her bones. She could not let go of it yet. She heard the boots on the marble outside first. Slow, steady, no clatter of armor, no roar of soldiers, just one set of footsteps walking straight down the hall toward her chamber door. The queen's grip on the apple tightened. Her thumb brushed the shiny red skin. The footsteps stopped outside. A shadow moved under the crack in the oak door. For a long beat, nothing happened. Then, the door pushed open. Slow, no force. No one burst in with a shout. Snow White stepped over the threshold and pulled the door closed behind her. She stood just inside the room, no weapon drawn, no stance to fight. She had walked hundreds of miles. She had hidden from hunters, slept in cold leaves, outrun every attempt on her life. And still, she walked forward, unafraid. Her gaze landed straight on the queen, by the mirror. She said, her voice was soft, steady, no trace of anger, no trace of triumph. The queen did not move, she did not speak. She just stared.
You don't have to be afraid anymore. I came here to end this.
The mirror's cold whisper echoed through the chamber, soft but unmissable. This is the moment that decides everything. The words settled in her bones, sharp as a shard of glass. Snow White stepped forward one slow step. She did not flinch. She did not reach for anything hidden at her own waist. She just stood there, open, unguarded, waiting. The queen's eyes scanned her face, line by line, looking for the trap, looking for the anger she had spent months expecting, for the hunger for her crown, for her throne, for everything she had built. There was nothing. No bite to her smile, no glint of greed in her eyes. She just looked tired. She looked like someone who had run far longer than she ever should have had to, who just wanted the running to stop. The queen's thumb pressed harder into the apple's skin, the 2 seats on the throne. The open hand, no coffin, no death. The fear with that faint, soft sliver of hope in her chest. The hope won. One by one, the queen's fingers relaxed and apple slipped. It hit the hard stone with a sharp, cracking thud. The impact split the apple clean open down its core. Black poison oozed out of the split, seeping into the narrow cracks between the marble tiles. The room held its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was the faint hiss of the poison eating into the grout between the marble tiles. For a long, still second, nothing happened. The ancient mirror stands against the wall behind the queen, its surface dark and quiet. The twisted black thorns of its frame stood rigid. The queen did not turn around. She kept her eyes locked on Snow White, waiting for something to break. Snow White did not move either. She just watched, waiting. No fear in her posture, no surprise on her face. Then, a sound, thin, sharp, high, a single crack running straight down the center of the mirror's glass. The crack spread fast. It branched left and right, splitting into 1,000 smaller lines, covering the entire surface before anyone could draw another breath. The glass shuddered. A fine dust of tiny splinters rained down first, hitting the floor with a soft, dry patter. Then the whole panel gave way. Thousands of shards cascaded off the frame, clattering against the marble, skittering across the floor to stop at the queen's boots. The air shifted. The cold, heavy weight that had pressed down on the chamber for years lifted, all at once. No cold whisper, no more waiting, no more visions of blood and coffins and death. Every dark future the mirror had ever shown the queen vanished, along with the glass that held them. No shadow remained. No threat hung in the air. It was gone. The queen stood still, listening to the last shard skitter to a stop against the base of the wall. The silence that filled the chamber was soft, not empty. It was the kind of silence that comes after a long storm, when the wind has finally died and the air feels clean again. Snow White stepped forward again, closing the gap between them, but the queen did not flinch. She stared at the pile of broken glass at her feet, and the whole truth slowly unspooled in her mind. This was the twist no one had ever seen coming. The mirror never predicted a fixed destiny. It never had a power of its own to force fate to fit its visions. It only reflected what the queen already carried inside her. It shaped the future out of her fear. Every night she had come to this chamber, trembling with the need to control what came next. Every time she saw a shadow of death, she reached for a knife. Every order she gave to hunt Snow White. Every poison she stirred in the dark cellar. Every disguise she sewed to sneak after the girl. Every step she took to stop the vision, she pulled that vision closer. She made it real. Her fear fed the mirror. The more afraid she grew, the darker the visions became. The queen turned her head and looked at the bare stone wall where the mirror stood. The dark stain the frame had left over years was still there, but it was just a stain now. No magic clung to it. No future waited there. She let her shoulders drop. The knot of tension that had sat between her shoulder blades for years loosened. All at once, the moment she chose to drop the apple, to set down her fear, fate itself changed. There was no longer a coffin waiting. There was no longer a rival waiting to steal her crown. There was just two women in a quiet chamber, breathing the same clean air. Snow White reached out and rested her hand lightly on the queen's forearm. The queen did not pull away. The twist was never the magic of the mirror. It was never the power of the crown or the claim to the throne. The most dangerous magic the queen ever faced was never in the glass. It was the fear of what might happen. Fear shapes its own future. When you let go of the fear, you let go of the future it would have made. And that is how fate changes.